Good evening, everyone. Welcome in. Latest edition, new edition. Can you stand the rain? Another edition of the Coast to Coast podcast here on InsideCarolina.com. Thanks for making us a part of your evening this holiday as we record this on the Sunday of Labor Day weekend. Sherrell McMillan and Sean Moran join me as always. I'm happy to be here. I am Joey Powell. We are brought to you by Johnny T-Shirt, as you guys are likely all aware. Big fans of theirs. Can't wait to talk a little more hoops with you all tonight. But hey, first things first, Sherrell. Let's cut right to the chase. The question everybody wants to answer: how do you feel about UNC's defensive line? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Um, Absolutely, all the talk everywhere right now around the IC community is about the start of football season, and we appreciate that. But certainly, we want to make sure that we're still getting your fill of basketball talk because we know there's a lot of you that care about that stuff too. And the season's not very far away. I will say before we dig in, I'm very grateful for all the folks that came by the Inside Carolina Live tailgate yesterday. Sherrell made an appearance, and happy to see him in the flesh. But a lot of folks came by and introduced themselves and just really said hey, and they said they appreciate the work that we do on this show, but also on all the other IC stuff. So really appreciate that from everybody. It's nice to meet some of you in person. And hey, the next time you're in the Bulls lot for a football game tailgate, come by and say hey. Certainly would love to put some face with some names or face with some handles or however you guys want to phrase it. But we appreciate all the support. Appreciate all of you guys tuning in and making us a part of uh, your routine or your game day or whatever you want to call it. We're grateful for you. With that said, boys, I think we found something last week. Um, we got a new little format that we were going to do these previews in. And so tonight we'll take the second step in that. We're going to talk about the juniors and seniors on UNC's roster. Seniors being RJ Davis and Armando Bacot, who have been on campus for a long time. Tar Heel fans are going to see their names etched in a lot of record books for a long time after this. We'll also talk a little bit tonight about Jalen Withers and Harrison Ingram. They're transfers, but they do have extended eligibility and have more years to play on this UNC roster. So we'll start again asking a couple of questions of Sherrell and Sean, talking about each one of those four players. And then, backed by popular demand, the game that has taken over all of the podcast world, and you heard it here first, like tens of thousands of people are clamoring for the return of No Cap or Sus right here on the Coast to Coast podcast. So we'll get to that in the second half of the show, have a little bit of fun there. Let's get started, shall we? Sherrell, first things first. Why don't we jump into Jalen Withers, a kid from North Carolina, committed to Louisville, has now transferred back home on the roster in Chapel Hill for Coach Hubert Davis and his team. So the first thing first, I'm going to ask the same questions we did last week for each player. Sherrell, what will success look like this season for Jalen Withers?
I think success for him is knocking down open shots and continuing to rebound like he has in the past. I think especially his freshman year, he played a little. He's played multiple positions at Louisville out of necessity, but I think the constant really has been his rebounding. And then 2 of the 3 years he shot decently from three, albeit in a small sample size his freshman year. So I think we've talked about all the time, over and over again since the season ended, about if UNC could just hit one or two more threes per game, especially the open ones. If they could knock a few of those down, it changes the outlook of the season completely, just by those two or three shots a game. And so I think for Withers, if he can again, I don't think he has to shoot 44%. I think it was like he did in conference play. But if he can be competent, 35, 36% on, from 3-point range, and also knock down a large majority of his open shots, he can do that. And then spell Harrison Ingram, at the four at times, and be a reliable rebounder, then I think it's a successful season for him. I don't think there's any grand designs on him being a full-time starter. He might, start some games, but I don't think he'll be a full-time starter or anything. I don't think he's going to be an all ACC guy or anything like that. I think just solid production is what UNC needs for him, and that will make it a successful season.
Sean, happy that you're here and have beaten down the technical difficulty bug. I want to ask you, what do you think fans can expect from Jalen Withers? Again, that people saw him play for Louisville, and he had the ability to be a dynamic contributor for that roster, despite the shambles that it was last season. What do you think fans should expect from Jalen Withers this year in a Tar Heel uniform?
I think similar to what Sherrell said, a large part is going to come down to his 3-point shooting. If he can, I don't think he needs to hit the 40% or above, but if he's in the high 30s. Last year he was also 90% overall in catch and shoot situations. But I think in addition, he's not a guy that is going to break defenders down. But I think if he's able to attack using 2 to 3 straight line dribbles, just to make people respect him off the 3-point line, I think that'll be a success. Strong defensive rebounder. I think also if he's able to both offensively and defensively switch between that 4, maybe a little bit of the 3, maybe even go up if need be. But I think from a defensive perspective, if he's able to provide some of that hybrid versatility that we think Hubert's looking for at that spot, I think that'll be a success. It'll be interesting to see from either a starting perspective or first man off the bench how that works and how he does fit in, both from a chemistry standpoint as well as a talent standpoint. Because 2 years ago, he did, the shooting numbers were subpar. So he did really increase, even though Louisville was one of the worst Power 5 teams there that has existed. He did shoot the ball well and he shot the ball efficiently. But once again, was at a 1-year time frame. So if he can stay consistent with his outside shot and bring a little bit both offensively and defensively, I don't think anybody's expecting him to average 15 points per game. But if he can stay in that, I'd say 8 to 11 points per game, I think that would be a victory.
Sherrell, I'm going to come back and already break format here, but I can do that because I have the controls. Louisville, indeed, and Sean hinted at it. Louisville was a kind of a train wreck at a dumpster fire last year. How much can just finding that new environment do for a player mentally so that it leads to the physical?
I mean, how many times have we talk about just in post games with Dewey or over with Bobby Frazier over the years, or your private conversations with some of the people in the program? They always talk about confidence, just how important. We had Jawad on last year in the preseason, just how important confidence for a guy like Leaky was, confidence, for a guy like Armando was. So when you're playing at a program like Louisville, which again, as we have all said, was one of the worst, teams in ACC history, I don't know how you can be terribly confident, because pretty much every game you're going to lose by 15 to 20, with the exceptions of a few close ones here or there. I think coming to a program like UNC, you're reinvigorated, not only because of your personal circumstance, but that the people around you are going to be as hungry as you are, because they were in a similar, I won't say similar, but they were in a very disappointing situation as well. So I think when you add two parties who both need fresh starts, it's very easy to have confidence. It's very easy to kind of get back to maybe who you were, from a confidence level. And then, it can't be understated. He is a North Carolina kid. He's from Charlotte. He's grown up around a lot of Carolina fans. He's been in the state. It's important to him. So I think you can't put a price on that either. Just the premium that comes with North Carolina kids playing at North Carolina. So once you add all that together, I think there's more comfort. He'll have a point guard, which he didn't have last year. He really have two. He didn't have he went from no point guards to two. So you add all that together, I think you'll get a more confident, assertive player who has shown his ability to really, be good in the ACC.
If nothing else, from an outsider's perspective, it looks that he is adjusting well with this team. I actually saw him tailgating in Charlotte with RJ and Armando yesterday, just having the college student experience, which I'm sure he got to do some of that at Louisville. But, to your point, being back in what feels like a home environment for him just must be the potential for a lot of really good things in the future this season. All right, moving on to our next player tonight. Let's talk about Harrison Ingram, a guy that North Carolina recruited really hard. Hubert Davis thought they were going to get him, and it just didn't materialize. He ended up at Stanford. But, hey, never say never. He's back in Chapel Hill. We'll be playing for the Tar Heels this year. Sean, I'm coming to you first. What does success look like for Harrison Ingram for the Tar Heels in 2023?
I think, getting Ingram is going to be – how he plays is going to be really important in terms of the actual long-term success of the Tar Heels. He had fairly high expectations coming into Stanford as being a potential one and done. I think he was right on that border in terms of ranking as well as ability, but he was kind of that next 5-star player in Stanford. And I think for him, probably not meant to carry a team, but I think he can be a very strong third, fourth option, very high IQ basketball player. I think before Elliot Cadeau reclass, he would have been the best passer on the team. But he's a guy very versatile from being able to score, being able to rebound, pass the ball, handle the ball. So I think success just takes what he did at Stanford, but from an efficiency standpoint, increases that. I think also from a 3-point percentage, he was 30%, 31%. So that needs to get up to, in my mind, I think ideally no less than 33, but 34 to 36%. He did have a pretty, and I think one of the things, whether it's UNC or Kansas, some of the schools that were recruiting him pretty hard looked at his catch and shoot numbers and spot up numbers and saw the potential there. Somewhat of a slow release. So I think that, that's one thing. But overall, I think a very cerebral ball player. He played against the best of the best in AAU, playing up 2 years. So I think success looks like him averaging 10 to 12 points, keeping the assist numbers high, and being able to once again help the ball movement and help the overall IQ of the team. But I think how he does will largely determine, because he's going to be a big piece next to, let's call it the big two of Armando and RJ. So how he does, I think will really, is it a tournament team or is it a championship type team?
Sherrell, what can fans expect from him? I think we've seen, as Sean alluded to a little bit, versatility is a little, I don't know, maybe a little understated for his game, but I do think he's a kid that can kind of do a lot of different things. So what should UNC fans be able to count on from Harrison Ingram when he plays next season?
I think his passing is probably the number one thing. I think versatility is probably number two. And it's interesting how he's looked at. Well, I'll say this. First off, in talking to some people, I know the big question is he going to play the 3? Is he going to play the 4? Or can he play the 3? The people I've talked to who I will say know basketball and have some knowledge of the Carolina program have said without hesitation that he can play the 3 at UNC. Now, does that mean they're going to ask him to do different things from what Leaky Black, who's been the primary 3 for, I guess, the past 3 seasons? Are they going to ask him to do different things? Are they going to compensate? I don't have that answer. But I do know that they believe he can play the 3. So I wanted to put that out there. He will play some 4. He's played some 4 in practices and pickup, but I do think he's capable. With him, like I said, the passing and the versatility, it is just interesting because the narrative that's kind of been formed is that, he had this great freshman season. He was Pac-12 freshman of the year, and then he really kind of, I don't want to say fell off a cliff, but dropped off considerably as a sophomore. But you look at the numbers, and his offensive rating was higher last year than it was his freshman year. His effective field goal percentage, now these aren't huge margins, but there is still an increase. It's better than it was his freshman year. His true shooting percentage was better last year than it was his freshman year. He was a better offensive rebounder last year than he was his freshman year. He had a higher assist rate his sophomore year than he did in his freshman year. He shot better from the field. From the 2-point range as a sophomore, and his 3-point percentage was basically the same. So it's weird kind of trying to marry the fact where like some people almost labeling him a disappointment based upon his high school ranking and his freshman year, when numerically his sophomore year was better than his freshman year. So I find that part interesting, but I think it's really important for him. Sean said the big two. There's no pressure on him relative to what he had last year as being the go-to scorer, the primary creator, arguably the best rebounder on the team. He's now, he's really kind of flying under the radar because everybody knows this team is RJ Davis. They know it's Armando Bacot. And then when you have a freshman like Elliot Cadeau come in, he's getting a lot of the attention. So a player as talented as Harrison Ingram is kind of in the background. And I think that's maybe where he'll be a lot more efficient and probably even more productive than he was at Stanford, because he's not going to be relied upon to do nearly as much.
Sean, I'm asking just because you're on the left coast. You probably saw a little more Stanford ball than Sherrell and I did. Even if that's like a few minutes, it's more than probably I saw over the course of the season. Do you think that maybe the fit there was just the fact that there wasn't a fit? I'm stumbling over my words now, but I mean, do you think that to Sherrell's point, the fact that he didn't meet the expectations a lot of people had of him was just due to the environment, and maybe that system wasn't it, or maybe the fact that he was relied on too much?
I think probably the latter to a certain extent. I mean, I think Stanford has always been kind of one player away where, outside of Zaire Williams, I think they've had some guys that have left maybe a year earlier than expected. Where I think if Ingram was able to have played with a Zaire or played with, some other talent, perhaps that could have been different. I thought coming back, because I know that was a decision that took a little while. Was he going to come back for a sophomore year? So I definitely expected him to have a stronger year than he did. I know Charlotte just went through the stats, but in terms of where he's at now, I think most people would not have predicted that when he did come back to Stanford. But I think in general that team did have its struggles. Struggling in the Pac-12. They did have a big win against Arizona during the season, but that was one of few and far between wins. And you look at Ken Palm in terms of the ranking, and they're in the 80s and 100s. So I don't know if it was fit or style, but once again, I think surrounded by more talented players, I think he can definitely get to where maybe people thought he could have been. But once again, when he came out of high school, ranked fairly highly, it wasn't this explosive athlete. It was just a very smart basketball player that he played almost all point guard in AAU play, and he was a guy that knew when to look for a shot, knew how to get teammates involved early, was able to run the pick and roll, able to hit the three, and he was doing it at his pace. So he wasn't sped up. He wasn't bothered by more athletic guys. But I think a new setting will do him well in a setting where he isn't the go-to guy. But I think one of the overall concerns, whether it's Ingram, Withers, etc., is there enough athleticism where you have guys that maybe aren't the best at breaking the defenders down or getting and finishing at the rim? Will there be enough athleticism? But I think he's going to be able to pick his spots and pick and roll. But how he plays with both RJ and Elliott, I think, will be one of the biggest things I'm looking forward to seeing how that works out.
Thanks for that, and that'll definitely be an intriguing pairing to see a guy like that with that skill set and that well-rounded of a game, not having the pressure on his shoulders and having more weapons around him, going from 0 point guards to 2, as you guys both threw out there. That's a heck of a new opportunity for a talented player. Moving on to the next two guys, and North Carolina fans have probably talked every single thing about Armando Bacot and RJ Davis that they possibly can. We've talked about them forever on this show, and both good, bad, and indifferent. I think this is going to be a little bit of a tricky question for each one of you, but I don't doubt your abilities to lay out some facts and provide a very plausible and contemplative answer. So, Sean, I'm coming to you first. Help me understand what success looks like for RJ Davis this season.
I think for him, I mean, since we have talked about him for a while, especially with the COVID year, and there wasn't during the summer, there wasn't a lot to talk about. But I think one of the things coming into Chapel Hill we were most excited about was here's a guy that played very, very well, obviously on the high school level, AAU level, shot over 40% from three in Nike UIBL, and from a size and stature perspective, you didn't see him being a one and done or a guy that left early, which has proven to be correct. And we did think he would be a guy that after 4 years, you look at the UNC scoring ranks and he's going to be up there. And I think if he has a season just like the past two, he could get easily in the top 15, perhaps get into that number 12 or 11, right around MJ's spot. So I think for him, and you've seen his points increase from 8.5 to 13.5 to 16.1, and I do think success is him continuing to slightly increase that. I don't think it's going to be 20 or anything like that, especially with the talent around him. But if he's at 16 to 17 per game, because I think with Cadeau, he's going to be able to look for his shot a little bit more. He's going to have better shots, ideally, and I'm hoping that it's not almost a back and forth, type of situation sometimes where it was with him and Caleb.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for him, it's can he stay at that 36% at a minimum? I would love to see him get into that 40% 3-point range, because I know he definitely had stretches both sophomore year and junior year where he was playing really well. Junior last year, I think when he got injured, that started to come down after the Syracuse game because he was start off slow, was shooting the lights out.
Yep.
So I think if he's taking smart shots, and scoring is going to be what he does best. I know he wants to play with the ball in his hands and show that he can be a point guard, but if he's almost a Marcus Howard Jr. light, I think to me that would be something I would love to see. Where forget the size, forget the position, do what you do best, and that's score, and do that in an efficient way. So I think for him, it's going to be increasing the scoring, ideally increasing that 3-point percentage just a little bit, and then from I'd say a mental standpoint, being able to coexist with a true freshman, new guys coming in. Obviously, it's his team and Armando's team, but from a sharing perspective and incorporating everybody, can the maturity of being a senior, does that show on the court in terms of him knowing how to pick his spots and really include everybody? I think some of the things I hated the most last year were the over dribbling and kind of when he did have his head down, which was a lot, but it definitely did happen, whether it was in transition or working off the pick and roll. So I think if he's able to keep his head up, look for teammates and once again, going back to scoring and shooting the ball a little bit better.
Sherrell, I think you may have a little bit of an easy answer here because, as Sean nicely pointed out, RJ's role is going to be a little different this year with Elliot Cadeau being a true point guard. And I think that may help ignite the score in him a little bit. So I want to ask you, Sherrell, same second question we've been asking. What do you think fans can count on from RJ this year? Because it may be a little different than what they've been able to count on from him in the past.
I think it's going to be the 3-point shooting, and I'll get back to that. But to answer your question, Sean, so RJ has 1,304 points, so he needs 560 points to pass Walter Davis into 10th all time in UNC history, which comes out over 33 games, which is what they played last year. He needs to average 16.9 points over 33 games to get into the top 10 scoring all time at UNC. So a chance, especially if they make deeper runs into the ACC tournament and the NCAA tournament, that lowers that number a bit. But 16.9 is not far fetched for him. I don't think. So we'll see. But Joey, yeah, I think it's the 3-point shooting is the thing. Excuse me, that they'll be able to count on for RJ Davis. Similar to Harrison Ingram, if you start just looking at the numbers like year in, year out, every year since he arrived at UNC, RJ Davis has gotten better. So his effective field goal percentage is 9 points higher than it was his freshman year as a junior. Each year, it's been iterative. Each year, it's gotten better. His 3-point shooting, it leveled off last year, but he's been at 36% pretty much each of the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all agree that he probably would have been higher if he had stayed healthy. To Sean's point, he had some stretches there where he was absolutely on fire. So I think that is closer to who RJ Davis is. So I expect him. Like I'm if we do over under show or whatever, I'm taking if it's 39.5 his 3-point percentage, I'm taking the over. I think he's the guy I think he can shoot 40% from 3, and I think that's what you'll count on from UNC because again, can't be overstated. With Harrison Ingram and Elliot Cadeau on the roster, he's going to get open shots and a lot more, I think, than he got in the past because the ball is going to move. Even Cormac Ryan to some degree. Just smart basketball players who are not going to let the ball stick. So I think the 3-point shooting is what you can count on.
I love you guys. That 36% from three field goal percentage is going to come up a little bit later. So hang on to that thought and that line of thinking. All right, last one. Same two questions. Sherrell, I'm going to start with you. Continuing our little snaking of questions here. Armando Bacot. This is a guy that absolutely could have left almost 4 times, I think, and gone to play professionally. Whether you think that's a long NBA career, whether you think that's a career in other places in professional environments overseas, he had the chance, that's for sure, and now is working on his MBA in his 5th year at UNC and still feels, even though he's the all-time leading rebounder in Tar Heel history, still feels he's got a lot of things left to prove, which blows my mind as somebody who watches ball, but certainly want to see what he's able to pull off with this. Sherrell, what does success look like this year for Armando Bacot in a world where we rarely see guys stay 4 years, much less 5 with the free COVID year? What does it look like for him this year?
I think it looks the same as the last 2 years. It's keep doing what you're doing. I think too often. Let me tell a story. So this comes back to it. It'll get there, I promise. We were talking about James Brown, UNC's 2024 center, with Eric Bossi one time, and he said what he loves about James Brown is that he knows who he is. He understands why he's in the position that he's in, and while he might try to do other things occasionally, he always goes back to it because that's what he's best at. And you probably should do what you're best at. You should be out on the court experimenting and trying new things during competitive ACC basketball games. So I think Armando Bacot has learned that over the last couple of years. I mean, we've gone. It's not to say that he can't like expand his range and do more with his jump shot, but I think when it gets to the nitty gritty and you get into games, you revert back to what you do best. And so for Armando, it's getting in the paint. It's the little hook shot. It's powering through guys. It's rebounding. So like for him, I think just do what you do. It, you don't have to add something every single year. You can just be really good at 2 or 3 things. Like I always get annoyed at the pitchers who are like, "I've got 7 pitches." It's like, yeah, but are they any good? Like if you have a fastball and a slider, you're good. As long if they're good, you're good.
Throw
And
3 good ones. I don't need
right,
3 and then 4 that are garbage.
right. So I think that's the key for Armando. That's what success looks like for him is just continue, where he's going. He can be more efficient, sure. There's ability to get better in the margins, but overall, there's not a lot that needs to change for him. And a quick note, since we're talking about records, his scoring numbers will probably have to have an asterisk beside him because he's going to have an extra year.
Mhm.
But he needs 54 points to pass Walter Davis to be in the top 10. And with a good season, he'll likely be UNC's second or third leading scorer of all time. He's not going to catch Hansbrough. It's just not going to happen. But he'll probably be, top 2 or 3 in points with an asterisk because he's 5 years, and he'll be number 1 in rebounding without an asterisk because he did it in 4.
Just watching the numbers based on the slight dynamic change of personnel on the roster is going to be just absolutely fascinating as we go through the season. And I think it's going to be unique too, as we consider now Armando is a grown ass man, right? You were talking about a kid who, when he got to campus, was still growing into his body and was still big, but now he's just full on grown man muscle and is built out accordingly. And so you'd kind of like to see him just start going through guys' chests on a regular basis. To your point, Sherrell, that's where he's been really effective on the block, whether it's using that little jump hook and then setting that up to start going through guys. But you'd like to start seeing some of that old man scrimp just becoming a routine part of his game. Sean, what do you think fans can count on from Armando this year? And again, I recognize I'm kind of hamstringing you guys and asking you stuff about players that we've seen a whole lot of. Get creative if you want to, but I got to throw the same question at you for the sake of the integrity of the format for the show today.
I don't know how creative you can get on this one in terms of what you can count on, but double doubles. I know last year we did the over under on how many double doubles. I would expect that to probably go up a little bit. I know he kind of took him a little while to get going in the preseason, or not the preseason, but the non-conference last year. I think hopefully one thing I would like to see is that hunger throughout the year, and obviously what happened last year should provide that versus coming as close as they did 2 seasons ago. So I think what you can count on: rebounding, most likely will be the top offensive rebounder in the ACC. Double doubles, very effective around the rim. I think if he can get some easier baskets, we saw a few games where they're running the floor and passes were going ahead. Once again, going back to Cadeau, I think that's a situation where maybe it's 2 on average per game, if not more, just easier baskets that he's getting. I think we've seen improvements, especially from the sophomore to junior year, on him catching the ball on the block and being very efficient with a dribble and a quick move. I think I know we've seen the videos of the 3-point shooting in workouts, and I know we've been hearing about that now for going into 3 seasons. But even going back to his sophomore year, where he was hitting a free throw line extended jump shot down to about 15 feet. If he's able to hit a few of those, I think that does open up the floor a lot just for him in terms of being able to attack, spin left, or just attack going left-handed. So I am curious to see if that can be something he's added to his game, which I would definitely like to see as he wanted to come back. So you want to see what he can add. But yeah, I think from a double-double perspective, and then my biggest question, the few games that he does see length thrown at him, how does he handle that? Because last year, whether it was Duke, Florida State, there were some struggles where you put a taller, longer defender around on him, and he kind of he mentally he wasn't there, and whether that was picking up a cheap foul, teams picking up an offensive foul when he does put his chest or his shoulder into your chest. So I think always being mentally focused, where that maybe got a little bit away towards the end of last season, and then finally health. You can't control that, but hopefully he's worked on his body and feels good coming into the season.
I think that's pretty well done considering what I was asking of you in that situation, Sean. So definitely get an A for effort, and the execution was at least at the league average. So I appreciate you there. One of the things that I did notice, I mentioned that some of the players were out tailgating and just being college kids yesterday and kind of mingling with fans and enjoying themselves. It was really cool to see. I think there was a lot of Johnny T-shirt gear being represented in that group yesterday. So I want to make sure that if you are coming to Chapel Hill this coming weekend for the home opener against Appalachian State, I mean, I know somewhere you need to go by. It's right there on East Franklin Street in Chapel Hill, or right there in your little browser address search area on your computer, on the interwebs there, place where you put in the addresses, and check that out. Hit a little JohnnyT-shirt.com. Get some new stuff. They've got amazing selection of football gear for every fan in your life. Or if you're going to be on campus, show up early Saturday, swing by East Franklin Street in Chapel Hill. Johnny T-shirt is a huge supporter of Inside Carolina. Real great partners of ours. We'll start up our giveaway again next week on the Inside Carolina Live pregame show. Johnny T-shirt's always hooking us up with a nice, beautiful gift card to give away to listeners. And you think I'm joking when I say beautiful. No, beautiful is the right word, because you can turn a gift card into anything from Johnny T-shirt you want.
Am I eligible for the gift card?
Negative, Ghost Rider. The pattern is full. But you are eligible to come by and get some awesome Inside Carolina swag as you did yesterday. But yeah, Johnny T-shirt, Franklin Street in Chapel Hill. Premium subscribers to Inside Carolina know you get that extra 10% off the top of their already amazing prices. Be sure to check them out. Thank them for their support, and we will thank you for doing so. The national guys will come in here and run a few advertisements if you're listening to the audio version of this. And video version, we'll just keep right along chugging. Coast to Coast Podcast here. I'm Joey Powell. Sherrell McMillan, Sean Moran joining me always. So glad those guys have made time on their Labor Day weekend to be a part of this. All right, guys, we've gone through and kind of broke down what we expect from the juniors and Caesars that are on the Tar Heel roster. But now here's the real fun. Back by popular demand. The rage that had the entire internet ablaze last week, the new game that has taken over. I mean, we're having to screen calls from the Game Show Network, various other online properties of people that want to turn No Cap or Sus into an empire. We're not quite ready for that. We're going to keep that here just between us. But we're going to play our second work of No Cap or Sus for all of you here tonight. Again, No Cap or Sus is a game that came to us because we felt like we were kind of being being chuggy. We felt like we were being old and lame, according to the kids out there on the streets. And so we want to kind of freshen things up a little bit. And thus we're bringing you No Cap or Sus. So how it works, I'm going to make a statement, and Sherrell and Sean are going to say, hey, I agree with that statement, no cap. Or they're going to say, I disagree with that statement, and it might not be quite correct, and I have some suspicions around it. And they're going to say that it's sus or suspect. All right. So let's get rolling. Same deal. I'll throw the statement out. Sherrell and Sean will each have a chance to respond with no cap or sus, and we'll keep it moving. Just trying to have some fun here as we get into the summer and try to get basketball close to us as we rolled ever closer to the middle of October when practice officially starts. All right, first statement in the second episode of No Cap or Sus here on Inside Carolina's Coast to Coast podcast. Sean Moran, I come to you. Sir, Jalen Withers will hit 4 threes in a game this coming season. You think that is no cap, or do you think that is sus?
That is a good one. I will go no cap on that one. I think there could be a game where he does get hot. Once again, put him in the corners, driving kick out to some open shooters. If he gets hot, I think 4 or more is doable.
Hey, shoot or shoot, right? Sherrell McMillan, having guys that can put the ball where shooters need to get it. Jalen Withers will hit 4 threes in a game this season. Is that no cap, or is that sus?
I concur with the esteemed gentleman from Los Angeles. That is no cap. That will happen.
The California delegation has made a movement and has so moved, or made a motion and has so moved and has been ratified that is indeed no cap, and Jalen Withers will hit 4 threes in a game this season for the Tar Heels. All right, next.
We have not disagreed on one yet, so I'm looking forward to seeing.
Didn't y'all split one last week? Am I misremembering that?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, so all right. Next one. Sherrell, I'll start with you this time. Harrison Ingram will start more than 25 games for the Tar Heels. Is that no cap, or is that sus?
Oh, that's completely no cap. There's, okay. I mean, I don't think that's even a question, honestly. Like, you don't recruit someone like Harrison Ingram, beat Kansas for him, to not start him as much as possible. Now, I guess you could factor injuries into there. You know, could that be a consideration? But as far as like him as a player, yeah, I think he's going to start every game, but senior night, you know, and maybe they'll start senior night too. I don't know, but yeah, I think he's embedded in the starting lineup, and that's a non-starter.
I love how you're getting adamant about it. That means it is truly no cap. Sean, same question. Harrison Ingram will start more than 25 games this season.
No cap. Agree with Sherrell on that one, unless there's an injury. But yeah, I wouldn't foresee him coming off the bench unless there was something drastic that happened this year.
All right, I love the fact that you guys mentioned earlier. I really do want y'all to split up on an answer now, but I love that you mentioned earlier about RJ Davis's shooting being around that 30% mark. He did shoot 36.1% from 3 last year. So the question I put here for the next round of no cap or sus, Sean Moran, RJ Davis will shoot 36% or better from 3 this coming season. No cap or sus?
I thought you were going to go maybe a little bit higher percentage. I think that's where we could have differed, but over 36%, going to go no cap with that one. Going back to his sophomore year, he did shoot 40% in conference play, and I know early in the year he was in the low 30s because there was a lot of struggling shooting the ball. Obviously, that continued from a team perspective, but he did get that percentage back up to rival his sophomore year. So I will go no cap with that one. I think 38% I might have gone under, but 36 going up.
Man, you were just absolutely clamping down on that 2% variation there. That delta is wide for Mr. Moran. Sherrell, RJ Davis will shoot 36% or better from 3. No cap or sus?
Before I answer that, yeah, I wanted to talk about Sean and the 36%. We were tracking a number. I can't remember exactly what it was, but there had never been a Carolina team that didn't have someone who shot at least 32% or better for a season. And up until probably the last 8 or so games, Carolina didn't have anyone who was shooting 32% or better. And Davis just got hot, I guess, the last month or so, and it got all the way up to 36 because, I mean, it's one point earlier in the season, I think he was in the 20s, the high 20s as well. So
that That's why I think it's a legit question because
Yeah.
again, the 36 and then recognizing that his role is going to shift a little bit. Maybe he blows that out of the water. I don't know. That's why I've posed the question to you, gentlemen.
Yeah, so I will answer the question by saying no cap because I think he's going to be in the 40s. I really, really do, for the reasons we talked about earlier, and the fact that despite some of the situations that he's been in over the last 2 years, he still managed to shoot 36%. He made 66 threes as a sophomore and 63 last year. So even with all the kind of rocky situations with how the team was playing and when they weren't playing great and no one else being a perimeter threat, he still was able to be consistent, despite the environment around him. So I think he'll have a better environment in which to flourish next year. And I do expect him to shoot 40%. I think 75, 83s isn't out of the question either.
I love that you've already got some hypothetical stats to throw out behind that. And you know what, guys? This game is absolutely taking off. I'm looking at a chat right now that has multiple players participating in No Cap or Sus, and guys are doing just like you, Sherrell, and backing that with numbers.
And whoever this South Carolina person is, amazing how Rattler outplayed the Wally overhyped May despite literally having zero.
Sir, this is a Wendy's.
Yeah. Like, did he really outplay him?
What are we even doing right now?
Did he just have more opportunities because he had no running game? Like, if Drake May had to throw 50 times, I'm sure he would have had 400 yards, but he didn't have to because UNC ran the ball for almost 170 yards. So, what are you doing?
Also, shout out to somebody who is in the chat for a Carolina basketball podcast. When I'm coming in here to talk about absolutely non-facts from a football game last night for a rival team. Way to go!
What did they say? Go touch some grass.
Go touch some grass.
Yeah.
Go touch some grass. All right, last one. We'll go ahead and throw this out to you guys. And again, I'm thankful for the folks that have joined us here on Labor Day weekend for a live show to talk basketball, especially after football just kicked off. Last question. Sean, I'll start with you. Actually, no, I'm going to start with Sherrell because I've been trying to snake you guys a little bit. Armando Bacot will average 30 minutes per game. We asked something similar in last year's over-under, okay? So I'm going to ask now, again, new lineup. Hubert Davis has been maligned all offseason about using and not using his bench, et cetera, et cetera. Going right now, Armando Bacot will average 30 minutes per game this coming season. Sherrell McMillan, is that statement no cap or sus?
It's no cap because we can only go by what we've seen, and what we've seen is that under Hubert Davis, Armando Bacot is going to play, and he's going to play a lot. So, and I don't think I know they have more bodies, but I still don't think you can afford to sit Armando for 10 or 11 or 12 minutes a game because he's that good. And I think the wins above replacement for him is kind of off the charts in my opinion. So I think he'll be around 32, 33.
Do you know what he was last year?
31.
It was 30.3 last year.
30.3, yeah.
And that was with having minimal replacement behind him, depending on who you talk to. So we'll have to see how that pans out this year. But Sherrell says no cap. He's gone 4 for 4, all no caps. Sean, no pressure. No cap or sus. Armando, go ahead.
This one's tough. I'm gonna keep it. Keep with Sherrell on this one. I think just over 30 minutes. I was surprised to look both 31.6 and then 30.3 last year. Obviously, you have the UVA game where he just played a few minutes, but there were a lot of games towards the end where he was under 30. And I think early on, you'll probably see some high 20s for him. Hopefully, if they are taking care of business, which has really been an issue the last 2 years for some of the games early on. But I think you'll see Washington getting playing time and them trying to work him getting rest. But at the end of the day, they have a very tough non-conference schedule. They have a tough ACC, and you're not having your best player of the year candidate not get 30 plus minutes in those big games. And once again, with Hubert Davis, he's gonna most likely go back to writing who he trusts in the second half, and I'm gonna go no cap on that one, even though I was very heavily debating as Sherrell was making his case.
Sorry, I was breathing. I apologize. Let me go Galaxy brain on this a little bit. I think the fact that there's more depth for UNC will make Armando play more minutes because the times he didn't play minutes, like Sean said, was either he got hurt or he's in foul trouble. there were a couple of games where he picked up, 3 in the first, 10 minutes of the first half, and he had to sit for a while, which obviously will impact your minutes played. I think this year, if he gets, a foul, they'll feel more comfortable sitting him for 2 or 3 minutes as opposed to letting him play until he gets the second or the third, which then, keeps him out for pretty much the rest of the half, if that makes sense. So, like, because he has backups, he can get spelled, a little more often, but maybe not as long, and he won't get in foul trouble where he has to sit for those long stretches.
So when he picks up his second, they'll be able to lift him rather than forcing him to keep, to stay in for a third because they didn't have an alternative.
Right. And then before he would get his third, and it's like, okay, he has to sit for the last 8 minutes, where he might get his second and he might have to sit from the under 8 timeout to the under 4 timeout as opposed to sitting for the whole half.
Yeah, shout out to Tony Dowd in the chat too, by the way, just making the comment that North Carolina needs him to be strong late in the season. And man, with this non-conference schedule that they've got lined up, I don't know how you're going to be able to manage his minutes and budget his freshness, but it's definitely going to be something up to the coaches who are making the nice contracts to be able to pull that off, because it's going to mean all the difference in the world to have your best players be able to give you minutes down the stretch when they're playing consequential games later in the year, that have postseason implications or are in the postseason. All right, fellas. We have not got a ton of questions in the chat, but I will throw a couple of them at you as I see them. From our guy Travis Faircloth. By the way, let me just put a wrap on No Cap or Sus. Nice job this week, guys. I will try to see if we can't get the hosts and the producers to give you guys some better stuff so that you're not all no capping everything next week. We will see if we can't do a little bit better of that round. But this has been the second episode of No Cap or Sus. Thank you guys for playing along. All right, now going to our guy Travis Faircloth in the chat, who's asked a really good question. Who is Armando Bacot's first off the bench backup, or do you think that UNC will play small when he goes out? I think it's a legit question. Sean, I'll come to you first.
I think Jalen Washington will be his first off the bench backup. I think as we laid out last episode, I think both now sophomores should be taking a leap. They didn't have a ton of playing time last year, so I think that leap will be minimal compared to maybe some other guys we've seen. But I think it's going to be, if he's healthy, looking forward to seeing what he's doing coming off the bench. And once again, if he's to stay around and be a starter next season, I think he needs to be getting that playing time so that he isn't transferring out. But a lot of that will depend on health. And I still think Okonkwo can get some minutes, with his hustle and his rebounding ability as well. So I think they'll go big. But once again, there's a lot of different options if they do need to go small up front.
All right, Sherrell, same question to you from Travis Faircloth about who is Armando's first replacement if he were to go to the bench.
Yeah, I'm going to be a politician here, and I'm going to say it depends on the matchup, because I truly believe that. I think Okonkwo gives you a better look against certain teams, and I think probably Jalen Washington, especially in games where you might have to score 85 or 90 or 95 points to win. I think in that situation, maybe you go with Jalen Washington just because of some of the ability we've seen, kind of in practice and in high school, and we've heard about for him to shoot, and then some of his offensive game that he had like against Virginia. So I think in a situation where you're going up and down the court and you need offense, maybe you go Jalen Washington. If it's a situation where maybe RJ Davis or Cormac Ryan is locked in and they can carry the offense, and there's another 6'9", 280 huge guy in the post, then maybe you go Okonkwo just because he's a little more athletic, he's a little stronger, more experienced, and he has that ruggedness to him. So I think it'll be situational, honestly. And I'm not trying to cop out, but I really believe that's how they're going to approach it.
I mean, I think that's the luxury this roster will have that they haven't had recently, where they really do seemingly have a fair balance, at least as we sit here in September. They seemingly have a fair balance of different looks that they can throw at you. We've talked about how it seems like Hubert Davis has a certain type that he wants to recruit and a certain type of player that he wants to bring in, whether it's from high school or the transfer portal. But they really do seemingly have some pieces that can show some versatility as a whole, depending on what their opponent's giving them or depending on who happens to be having a good or a bad night. I think it's not a political answer at all, Cheryl. I think it's just one, really analyzing what the situation is of this coming season. With that said, we're going to put a bow on this, let everybody get back to their their Labor Day weekend. Man, I'm running out of gas quickly. But again, we appreciate everybody who joined us tonight. If you're listening to us via your podcast stream, hey, make sure you tell your friends. We want more subscribers. We want more listeners. We want more people getting involved. We will continue to do this show up until we get closer into the season when we start going weekly. But in 2 weeks, you can definitely check us out again, where we will preview the remaining members of UNC's roster. The guys that just transferred in will give you the same breakdowns that we've done for the last 2 weeks, and hopefully, maybe you'll learn a little something about it. And if nothing else, we'll just have some more fun playing No Cap or Sus. But until next time, a special shout out to John Siegley for producing, to Sherrell McMillan and Sean Moran for being a part of the show. I love everybody being here. Like the show, subscribe, all that good stuff. Get us on YouTube, however you want to join us. Just make sure you're getting all this Inside Carolina content sent straight to you directly. All you got to do is consume it, man. We make it easy on you. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt. Thanks to everybody for being a part of it. We'll talk to you next time here on the Coast to Coast podcast from InsideCarolina.com. I'm Joey Powell, late.